What is going on, guys? Once again, thank you for entering the chamber. Today we're going to be taking a fresh look at Turles. Before we got started, we have a shout out for a set of aftermarket leaders made by Davidson TCG. They do custom leaders for a variety of the leaders in the game, and they're very pretty. They're highly legible and foil on both sides. Excellent foiling. If you want to check these guys out, we're going to include a link to their page in the description. Their affordable prices are around $25, $30 depending on the specifics. There's a couple of options when you get them made. They're just an all-around great choice, and we're going to be using their leader for the rest of the video. So, there's a lot to talk about with Turles. He's a very complicated green leader that has a lot of very defined strengths because of his unique gimmicks with the Crusher Corps members. So to start off, he comes with a permanent that says if you kill your Crusher Corps members to pay for card costs, they go to the warp and not the drop. This means that you can't use things like Cell Xeno, Belmod, card effects like that with any Crusher Corps members because they don't successfully pay the cost. They go to the warp instead of the drop. So you typically want to refrain from using card effects like that. He has an extra auto that when you put him in your leader area, you put this card here, the Tree of Might, into your opponent's battle area. We'll talk about this in a moment. On front, when he attacks, you may take a life, check top 5, add any Crusher Corps member that you find, shuffle your deck. You awaken at 4 lives or less, or if your opponent has 3 or more cards face up in their life. He has a mini game with face up and face down cards. We'll talk about that in a bit. Most of the time, almost all of the time, you're awakening at 4 lives and not having 3 cards face up. Regardless, once awakened, he turns into Turles Fiendish Force. Fiendish Force keeps the same permanent that he had on the front side, where you basically can't sacrifice Crusher Corps members. He gains a second permanent that says that whenever he deals damage, you pick what cards your opponent takes. This is very powerful in conjunction with the cards in the deck. It's a really, really important permanent. Once awakened, when he attacks, you just draw a card instead of searching a Crusher Corps. And then finally, he has an activate main to put 1 card from your hand on the bottom of your deck. And if you do, you get to add a copy of a card called Fruit of the Tree of Might from your drop area back to your hand. We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's talk about Tree of Might. Tree of Might's kind of a weird card because it feels like a field because it's an extra card that gets played to your opponent's battle area, but it's not a field. It just stays there. It has a permanent that says your opponent can't get rid of it, long story short. And in addition, it makes your Crusher Corps members cost 1 less to combo. We have a bunch of cards in here that are 1 plus 3Ks, so this card makes it so that for us, our Crusher Corps are free to combo. As it says your opponent, but this card is in your opponent's area, so the opponent in this case is us. The main reason it's in here is that at the start of your opponent's main phase, after they charge and draw, they flip 1 card in their life face up, and if they do, you get to search a copy of Fruit of the Tree of Might from your deck to your hand. And that brings us to probably the most important card in the deck, which is our 4 copies of Fruit of the Tree of Might. Fruit is a 1-cost activate battle that gives any battle card or leader card a 20,000 power boost. And if that card has Turles in its character name, it also gains a double strike. So this is part of what's really useful about your leader once you're awakened, is every swing with him is a 35k double strike, or at least you're threatening a 35k double strike because of fruits. And in addition, because a lot of your opponent's life is going to be face up, you can hand your opponent cards that maybe they don't really need at the moment, and then keep cards that they do need in their life. Really powerful interaction here. There is an additional cost to Fruit, however, in that you also have to flip 1 card in your opponent's life that's face up, face down to use it. So there's some counterplay and life management on the Turles side of the board, where they're trying to control how many face-up cards your opponent has and how many face-down cards your opponent has. If all of their life is face up, your Tree of Might starts searching Fruit. But on the other hand, if all of their cards in their life are face down, you can no longer activate Tree of Might because you don't have a life to flip. To help us manage our opponent's life, We run 2 copies of Kill Driver. Kill Driver is also activate battle for 1 energy that gives a battle or leader card a 10k boost. And then it optionally flips 1 card on our opponent's life face up. And then if it's on our turn, we can either draw a card or KO an opponent's battle card that's energy cost higher than their current energy. And if it's on your opponent's turn, it's just a 1 plus 10k draw card. So this is here because of all of our opponent's lives are face down. We can use a Kill Driver to flip something face up, and then use Fruit and immediately flip it back face down. And that 2-card combo will give you a 30k double strike just for these 2 cards. It is energy intensive, but the damage is, your opponent can't combo out of that, or if they do, it costs like their entire hand. It's very punishing. So, with all of that out of the way, let's talk about the core Crusher Corps members. All of these guys that we're going to talk about here are 1 plus 3Ks. But because of Tree of Might, they don't cost us any energy to combo. We run 4 copies of Ricin and 4 copies of Lakessi. Now normally we would separate these cards, but these 2 are paired up. Whenever you combo with either one of them, after the battle, they go from your combo area to your battle area. Specifically, they don't touch the drop, so you can't use Frieza Army Healing Pod. When one of them is played, they automatically search the other. So if you combo Lakessi, it'll search a Ricin. You can search a Ricin, it'll search a Lakessi. Lakessi will come out in rest mode, but when he gets played, you draw a card and discard a card. Ricin comes out in active mode, and he's a 5k blocker. So you get a lot of free card advantage when you combo these guys, since you can beat out swings. There's a lot of ways you can take advantage of the draw a card, discard a card effect, and then you get a free blocker to soak extra attacks. These guys right here on their own make your aggro matchup relatively favored, since you have a lot of like free combos and outs on top of free blockers you can get for no energy. Onto our next Crusher Corps member. We run 4 copies of Dice. Dice, like the twins, when he gets comboed, he comes into play. When he gets played, he plays in rest mode, and then you check the top 3 for any Crusher Corps member. We run 24 Crusher Corps in this deck, but you lose them rapidly since your leader searches them. Lakessi and Ricin pull each other out. So occasionally Dice will whiff, but he's still basically a free combo piece that gets you out of swings, and then plays later that you can take advantage for other effects. So even if he misses, it's still not the end of the world because you didn't pay anything for him. And then finally, we run 1 copy of Almond. Almond is, again, like the other Crusher Corps members, when he gets comboed, he comes into play in rest mode. You can pay an energy and KO one of your opponent's battle cards that costs 5 or more, and then send Almond to your warp. So he's a bit of like spot removal for really expensive stuff. But ultimately only run the 1 copy of him because he's pretty fringe. But it is useful to have him because he is another Crusher Corps member, which we'll talk about why that's useful in a bit. Just for now, know that it's important that you have an extra name. Before we go on, for all of these guys, this is something that's very important to talk about and understand with this deck. All of these cards are 3k combos. They also cost an energy to combo, but the Tree of Might turns that off. 3 is a very weird value, and your mileage will vary a little bit for how useful the 3000 combo power is, particularly with other attacks that are at weird totals like 18 or 19k. Usually 19k is the big one where these cards are very awkward. But setting that aside, on defense, your first 2 Crusher Corps are effectively 5ks. For example, if you go like leader to leader, both leaders are at 10k. If you combo Dice to go to 13, it's just like you comboed another card to go to 15. You still get out of the swing. If they attack you at 15 and you're still at 10, comboing 2 will put you at 16, which is just like you went to 20 with 2 cards. Your third one is where you basically lose value, because that puts you at 19, which is the same thing as if you'd comboed up to 16. So you don't get any value out of the third one on defense. On offense, your first one doesn't do anything. Your second one is like in total like going up 5k. So in general, these cards are more useful on defense than on offense. So you can take advantage of their combo power to fade swings. But on occasion, you'll need to spend them on offense, whether to just cash in for like raw totals or to trigger a couple of card effects, which we'll talk about in a bit. But that's just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about all of these cards, is how you use them, is they're more defensive than offensive in application. So, moving on to the actual Turles cards. First, we run a playset of Turles Crusher Corps Commander. Commander has a pseudo arrival ability where if you have two different, just any two Crusher Corps members in your combo area, you can pay a single green energy and play him with an activate battle, kind of like a rival. When he comes down, you can put one card from your hand at the bottom of your deck, flip up to one card in your opponent's life face up, and then draw two cards. In addition, he gets a 5k boost until the end of your opponent's next turn. So you can arrival him on your opponent's turn on defense, after using some of your Crusher Cores to, get out of swings. And then bottom deck like a fruit, for example, because you can get that fruit back later, and just create a ton of card advantage, all on your opponent's turn. So very, very, very good card. Finally, the boss monster for the deck is 3 copies of Turles Cosmic Rogue. Rogue is a 4-drop, but he costs 2 energy if you have 3 or more different Crusher Corps cards, which sounds like a little tough, but remember that any twin will find the other twin, so that's 2. And then either a commander, dice, almond, any of the above, will give you the 3rd name. So it's actually not too hard to get 3 names out for this guy. But if you have 3 names out, he costs 2 instead of 4. He has a permanent that says that on your turn, all Crusher Corps members get a 10k boost. This makes your little guys actually able to threaten things, and this guy on his own is a 25k critical, fairly threatening. When he attacks, you KO one of your opponent's battle cards. This guy is a great card to pair with fruit, because then in total you're at a 45 double strike critical. Assuming they don't negate the attack, they're going to have basically no choice but to take that damage unless they really want to combo all the way up to 45, which is also a win for you. Our last Crusher Corps member is our super combo Cacao. Cacao is a very basic super combo. If your life is a 4 or less, draw a card, and then he's a 0 plus 10k. Pretty basic, but he's a Crusher Corps, so he's searchable off of our search effects, which is the main reason he gets included. Really not a whole lot to say here. Alright. Next, let's talk about our Unison package. So a lot of Turles decks will run Demigra, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with Demigra. Demigra's a great Unison. But we, in this list, run 4 copies of Golden Frieza, Unison of Malice. So, a lot of you are probably thinking,
stupid. You're so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
Why don't we run Demigra? Well, this list is built to grind our opponent out a bit more. Turles doesn't have a super long grind game because eventually all of the cards in your opponent's life become face up, which turns off Tree of Might. But for most of the game, you can search and recur fruits and effectively draw a bunch of extra cards by recycling fruits. And Frieza helps with this by giving us a way to put fruits back into our deck in the early to mid game before we awaken. He has a +1 where you can draw a card and then put 1 card on top of your deck. If you do, he gains critical. So this is great because if you have, like I said, a spare fruit, you can put a fruit back in. Also, if you have like 1 of each twin, you can put 1 twin back. And when you combo the first twin, you can find that other twin right back out of the deck. So you effectively haven't really lost anything. So this makes his draw 1, put 1 back on top, basically just a draw 1 effect. So very, very powerful Unison on top of being a 15k critical. Plus his -2 to make our opponent have to kill a battle card if they attack with a battle card. Just helps make attacks for our opponent's turns awkward if we want to either save a DPU for a future turn, or if we don't have a DPU. Or if our hand size is kind of low and DPU is risky. It's just a great fallback option. To go along with our Unison, we of course run 4 copies of Dormant Potential Unleashed. It's dormant potential unleashed. This card stops your opponent's turn. It costs no energy. If you have a Unison, you can discard a fruit with it, and then your leader can get that fruit back once awakened by using his activate main, so you can kind of nullify a lot of the cost. It's just a very good card. There's not a whole lot to say here. And in the same token of just generic good cards, we also play 4 copies of Frieza, charismatic villain. Villain's a free counterplay if we have a Unison with 2 or more markers, which isn't too hard for us to accomplish. Again, we have some free blockers to help keep our Unison alive, so they usually will be at least at 2. When he gets played and comes down, you KO someone that costs 7 or less. Straightforward, very, very good card as well. Alright, so now on to all of the tech choices. Because we play Golden Frieza instead of Demigra, we don't have a lot of turn 1 plays, primarily the Crusher Corps Commander. So to help with that, we run a playset of Tapion, Fate of a Hero. Tapion is an alternative turn 1 play aside from Crusher Corps Commander, but he maintains a lot of value throughout the game, as he's effectively just a 1-cost 15k blocker that draws a card. So he's just a lot of like straight value, and a great opener, especially against like more aggressive decks. We can cash him in as a blocker, and alternatively, if we're up against a deck where we need to go faster and pressure our opponent, a 15k swing is usually enough to push for early damage. So Tapion's kind of decent in every matchup, on top of generating card advantage. Just an all around very well rounded, efficient card. Next, we have 3 copies of Beerus, Godly Majesty. When Lakessi makes us discard a card, Lakessi will be in play, which means if you discard Beerus to Lakessi, Beerus will come out, which is the main reason he's in here. Sometimes the second copy can get stuck in your hand for a little while, but that's a small price to pay for the free advantage you can generate off of Unison or Lakessi. And in theory, you could cash him in the drop area by discarding a card and warping him and paying an energy to KO a 3-drop or less. That's occasionally useful against like Black Mass Saiyan, since this deck has a very tough time dealing with that card. But other than that, he's mostly just here as like an extra free 15k beater that we can play off of our twins. Next, for our only actual hard negate, we run 2 copies of Shocking Deathball. We have a lot of ways in this deck to fade attacks. You know, we can eat a fruit to beat bigger swings. We have blockers and free 10k combos to get out of like wider attacks. But sometimes we just need to stop an attack cold, and so Shocking Deathball is our negative choice for that. It's free if we have 5 or more cards in our drop area, as long as we take a life. It stops an attack and it KOs a 2-drop or less. It's just a very good negate. Easy slot for us. And then finally, the SCR for the deck. We run 1 copy of Grade 8 Mass Saiyan, Primal Carnage. This is more of a utility SCR because he's primarily in here for his auto, that when he gets comboed, you can remove him from the game to KO an opponent's battle card ignoring barrier. So he's effectively a activate battle Slumber Strike that ignores barrier. So it's a very good utility piece. In theory, you can cash him in for 5 green and play him as a 40k triple strike dual attack. If the game goes that long, sometimes, you know, against like really controlled decks like Baby or Sun Shenron, if they don't have a 9-drop, this is just the card effect that we need to, you know, close the game out. But for the most part, this is in here for the utility of being able to just KO anything ignoring barrier at battle speed. That actually concludes our deck profile. Turles is a very straightforward deck once you understand all the pieces, but it can be very difficult to play against if you're not familiar with the cards. So with all that being said, we're now going to talk a little bit about what you can do against Turles. Turles has a rather important minigame where, thanks to Tree of Might, he's trying to flip cards face up constantly to search out fruits, and then use fruits or damage to basically put those cards either like back in your hand or back down. The best way you can play against that is decide what would be most awkward for the Turles player you're playing against. So in other words, if you really don't want your opponent to hit you with a Fruit of the Tree of Might, and they swing at you with something kind of random before a Turles, you can just take the damage and take the face-up card in your life, and if they have nothing face-up in their life, they can't resolve fruit, because one of the costs to using fruit is being able to flip a card face down. So you can opt to take damage or take your own life even for certain effects to leave all of your life face down, and that will deny them from using fruits. You should be wary, however, that either a Crusher Corps commander or a kill driver can flip a card back up in your life face up at activate battle speed. So even if you are all of your lives are face down, if they have 2 or more energy, that attack is still threatening to hit you with a fruit. So it's something you should keep in mind. The other thing that you can do to kind of help against Turles is try not to allow your opponent to get a lot of mileage out of the Crusher Corps members. So these cards are great at stopping smaller swings, you know, a 15k swing here, 20k swing there, because the first couple, they're effectively 5ks, so they're good at clearing small attacks. But as the game goes on, bigger swings will kind of render these cards, I wouldn't say completely moot, because you do still get some combo power out of them, but not as efficient. So against Turles, generally you either want to completely try to overwhelm the Turles player with like a large number of attacks to get through the various blockers and free combos, or hit them with a high amount of quality attacks. If you need to kill the Turles player and you just invest a few smaller swings here and there to try to chip at them, all that they're going to do is get free plays and get free advantage out of your swings. So they'll actually create tempo and card advantage on your turn. So the biggest way you can avoid that is either A, by prepping to have a large amount of swings, or B, only swinging with like card effects that are like really impactful, and then probably putting even a little bit of extra combo power behind it, so they have to invest some resources from their hand. Otherwise you're going to lose, or you just get drowned out by free card advantage. But that really wraps us up for our Turles deck profile. Turles is an excellent green leader. He definitely plays his own, unique game and gimmick. If you enjoyed this deck profile, please consider giving us a like, following our Facebook page, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. We're going to be doing more deck profiles, and in the near future we're going to have a matchup with Turles. So if you want to see this deck in action, give us a subscribe and you'll be able to catch that live. Until next time, guys, thanks for entering the chamber.